Welcome to EUPrivacyForAll, Session 7 on GDPR regarding controllers, Articles 22 and 24. According to Article 22, drafted by European Parliament, the controller shall adopt appropriate policies and implement appropriate and demonstrable technical and organizational measures, having regard to the state of the art, the nature of the personal data processed, the context, scope, purposes, and risks involved. According to EU Council, the same wording is retained, apart from the reference not done anymore to the state of the art. Additionally, in paragraph 2a, EU Council refers to appropriate data protection policies, and 2b, to code of conducts and certification. Key provisions in the GDPR on controllership derived from the definition of the controller in Article 4.5. A controller is the natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body which alone or jointly with others determine the purposes and means of the processing of personal data. Article 22 on the responsibility of the controller states the following. First, taking into account nature, scope, context, and purposes of the processing, as well as risks of varying likelihood and severity for the rights and freedoms of individuals, the controller shall implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure and be able to demonstrate that the processing of personal data is in compliance with this regulation. As you can notice, the wording proposed by EU Council in the end was retained. No reference to the state of the art. These measures are going to be reviewed and updated where necessary. This is something that is also in line with EU Council positioning, as European Parliament was asking for a review at least each 2 years. Joint controllers are framed by Article 24. When two or more controllers jointly determine the purposes and means of the personal data processing, they have the obligation to determine in a transparent manner their respective responsibilities, particularly regarding the exercising of the rights of the data subject. The arrangement they draft may designate a point of contact for data subjects. Despite this provision, it is made really clear in the second paragraph that a data subject may exercise his or her rights against each of the controllers. Finally, the arrangement between joint controllers shall duly reflect the joint controllers' respective effective roles and relationships vis-à-vis data subjects. And this arrangement should be made available for the data subjects. Another interesting article in the GDPR is Article 34 on prior consultation. It stresses the fact that a controller should specify the respective responsibilities of each joint controller or processor. Currently, the directive defines controller in Article 2D. The definition is pretty the same as in GDPR. A natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or any other body which alone or jointly with others determines the purposes and means of the processing of personal data. Article 6.2 stresses the fact that the controller has to ensure the principles related to data quality. This is the main responsibility as defined in the directive. What should accountable data controllers get prepared for? Pay attention to the fact that this is a non-exhaustive list. First, determine purposes and means decided upon with regard to the processing. Second, and this is key, document appropriate technical and organizational measures, the so-called TOMs, taking into account, as suggested by EU Council, the nature, scope, context, purposes of the processing, but also the risks of varying likelihood and severity for the rights and freedoms of individuals. This is the so-called risk-based approach. Review and update the measures taken whenever necessary. Implement appropriate data protection policies. This is an obligation for the data controller that is not specified in GDPR for processors. Promote the adhesion to non-binding tools such as codes of conduct and certification. Many other obligations, such as the one of having records of processing activities, are identified in GDPR. Finally, let's mention that the documentation on accountability that will be provided by EDPB might specify and clarify what are the obligations of an accountable data controller.